My name is Mary, and I recently did some research in a sports organisation where I designed and delivered an intervention. I shared athlete mental well-being data with a coach to try and improve athlete well-being and coach-athlete relationships. The following presentation is an exploration of the results from the intervention, and I want to help coaches consider how they can best support their athletes' well-being. The aim of this presentation is to explain the need for interventions in sport that seek to improve athlete mental well-being. I'm going to describe the methods I used to deliver the wellbeing intervention and explore the results of the intervention. Finally, I will offer you some practical ways that you consider athlete mental wellbeing in your sporting organisation. Why do we need mental wellbeing interventions in sport? Having worked in sporting organisations, I have noticed it is common to focus on areas of physical performance. For example, we track body composition, sprinting and endurance capacities, and force and power to help athletes perform at their peak physical condition. These are all important aspects of sport, but what about the mental aspect of sport performance? During a sporting season, an athlete is not only impacted physically, but also mentally. Things that could impact them are emotional exhaustion, career security, stressful life events, and performance anxiety. These are all things that can have an impact on an athlete's mental well-being. So why should we consider an athlete's mental well-being? Well, mental well-being has been directly linked to performance. So when athletes' well-being decreases, so can their performances. Examples include greater fatigue, which means delays in decision making, elevated stress, which has been linked to greater risk of injury, greater risk of emotional burnout, which can lead to reduced physical development, and reduced emotional control, which can lead to an inability to bounce back from setbacks. So we know that enhancing mental well-being is important for athletes to perform at their peak, but it's also important for their general life and happiness. What is your role in supporting athlete well-being as a sport coach? Well, researchers found that coaches have an important role in supporting athlete well-being. Specifically, being open, assuring, and supportive of athletes can all help to improve an athlete's well-being. In the intervention, we had the coach heavily involved because the research shows that a good quality coach-athlete relationship can positively improve athlete well-being. Now, it's time to explain how we delivered a mental well-being intervention in a sports organisation. The intervention lasted for 11 weeks, and what I'm going to do now is detail what happened across these 11 weeks to help explain the research process to you. First of all, we recruited a coach to participate in the study, and in the first week of research, the coach's 25 athletes all participated in a group workshop. The aim was to understand the ways in which the coach could best support their mental well-being. The key findings from that workshop were that athletes wanted to be treated as a human over a player and for the coach to adopt a positive attitude in the sporting environment. Then, from the 25 athletes who participated in the first workshop, 5 athletes were selected at random to participate in the intervention. During the intervention, we collected well-being data and coach-athlete relationship data through using questionnaires over the course of the intervention. As you can see from our timeline, we had a baseline phase of 2 weeks, intervention phase of 5 weeks, and a post-intervention phase of 2 weeks. And a quick explanation of these phases. A baseline phase is to measure data before we start an intervention so that we can see if the intervention influences any change. The intervention phase is where we make the changes and we see if there's any impact on the things that we are measuring, which, as a reminder, was well-being and coach-athlete relationship quality. And finally, the post-intervention phase is to measure the data after we finish the intervention to see what happens when we stop the intervention. So, what was the intervention? We collected well-being data off the athletes on a weekly basis, and we converted their well-being scores into a traffic light system. So, a green score meant that the athlete had high well-being, an amber score meant the athlete had average well-being, and a red score meant the athlete had poor well-being. Once we converted the wellbeing scores into the traffic light system, we took the scores and fed them back to the athlete's coach. We did this on a weekly basis over the 5-week intervention period. The coach participated in a mentor session where this wellbeing information was fed back to them, and we discussed ways in which they could support their athlete's wellbeing. The mentor session was informed by the results of the focus group, which was to treat the athletes as humans over players and to adopt a positive attitude in the sporting organisation. We also staggered the amount of wellbeing data that we provided to the coach. In week 1, they received athlete 1's wellbeing score. In week 2, they received athlete 1 and 2's wellbeing scores, and so on, until week 5 when they received all the athletes' wellbeing scores. We did this to not overwhelm the coach because receiving wellbeing scores can be challenging, and we did not want to impact the coach negatively by participating in the study. Finally, in week 11 of the intervention, we interviewed the coach and the 5 athletes who participated in the intervention. We did this to be able to understand their experience of participating in the intervention so that we could make recommendations for future research or for applying it in a sports organisation. On to the results of the research. We analysed the data that we collected across the intervention, and we found that the intervention did not have a statistically significant impact on either well-being or coach-athlete relationship quality. However, it's important to note that the participants reported high scores throughout the intervention. So the athletes had high well-being, and also the coach and athletes reported high coach-athlete relationship quality, which means that it's hard to see any big changes in scores when they are consistently high. So it might have been better to roll the intervention out where coaches and athletes reported a lower relationship quality or lower well-being score. While we did not find any significance when analysing the numbers, the interviews we completed helped us to understand the coach and athlete's experience of participating in the intervention. What we found was that completing a well-being questionnaire helped the athletes to reflect on their well-being more regularly, and completing the coach-athlete relationship quality questionnaire helped the coach and athletes to regularly reflect on their relationship. Regular reflection can help to increase self-awareness, and it can help individuals to make positive changes to enhance their well-being or their coach-athlete relationships. The participants revealed it can also be challenging to be truthful about well-being or coach-athlete relationships because they thought it might impact their playing time or their relationship with their coaches. That means the athletes may have reported higher scores in the study and the results may not have reflected their true thoughts and feelings. Finally, the participants thought that the intervention could be a tool to help break down barriers to seeking help for well-being. They felt the intervention was good as they could indirectly report about their well-being, and it helped because it wasn't a direct conversation about mental well-being with their coach, which they can find to be challenging. The results may show that in sport, athletes feel that they are expected to be tough and not appear mentally weak. So now that we've explained the results, what are the practical ways that you as a sports coach can consider the mental well-being of your athletes? First of all, be mindful of how your relationship with your athletes impacts their well-being. The research shows that a positive coach-athlete relationship can have a positive impact on well-being. So focus on your relationships with your athletes so that they can be more fulfilled in their sport. Second, try to support athletes to reflect more regularly on their mental well-being by creating a positive culture. The findings of the intervention show that regular reflection was beneficial for the athletes and for the coach, and reflection means that you can be more proactive in identifying when well-being may be dropping. Finally, find ways that you demonstrate that you care for your athletes' mental well-being. Participating in the intervention was a positive way for the coach to demonstrate their commitment to supporting their athletes' well-being. So consider how you could show your care to your athletes. And finally, remember that your athlete's well-being is important to support, but that it should not fall entirely on your shoulders. If your organisation has the resources, you should consider working with a sport and exercise psychologist to support your athlete's mental well-being. The intervention should be used in collaboration with a sport and exercise psychologist to be able to uphold ethical standards while tracking athlete mental well-being data. Be aware of when to seek support for both your athletes and yourself. Your athlete's well-being is important, But to be able to support them, you also need to care for your own well-being as a sport coach. On this page, you can see some of the places where you can find resources about learning more about well-being, or organizations that you can contact if you're struggling with your own well-being or need advice about an athlete. Thank you so much for engaging with this presentation describing the research into mental well-being intervention.